For weeks we've heard nothing but rumors and conspiracies when it comes to Charlie Kirk. But today we're going to be talking about real text messages that are proven to be from Charlie Kirk himself just hours before his life was cut tragically short. And I want to explore how this and some other information that I found along the way, some earlier things that Charlie has said, could point to a potentially different and even more sinister motive behind his assassination. Now, I'm not saying that is absolutely true, right? I don't want to feed another conspiracy. That's not what I do. But I want to look at the facts with these text messages, previous things that Charlie has said that I've, kind of dug up. They've been out there, but, I hadn't heard those. And I think it's really important to look at this angle specifically and see, is there another player here that, maybe I missed all along? Now, there are three words that almost every YouTuber and influencer and people on social media you'll never hear them say. But if I'm wrong, I will say it. I was wrong. But we have to explore these credible text messages and put them up against what we already know and see if there's anything more to this. I'd love to hear your opinion, man. Did you see these text messages as like a major bombshell, or did it kind of solidify a feeling you already had maybe? Maybe it doesn't change anything for you. Whatever your opinion is, leave it down below. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So the first thing I want to talk about is Candace Owens, because I'm going to give her credit because she actually did bring receipts this time. Now, I've been on the side of things hearing all of the different theories she's had, like, okay, this sounds insane, and if you have receipts, bring them. Well, this time she did, right? So credit to her for actually doing that. We may have never seen them if she hadn't released them. Were those hers to release in the first place? Well, no. But I think it could be important for what we're looking at here. There's been a whole lot of other things that she said. Cult conspiracy theories, and there's a lot more context to that, but trust me, it's as crazy as it sounds. To Charlie coming to her in a dream, supposedly, and telling her that he was betrayed. Somehow that's possible, even though the dead in Christ know nothing of this world any longer. But never mind all that. He chose Candace to come down to, not his wife, not his kids, if that were even possible. He chose Candace Owens to come down to. Okay, anyways, there's also, the things with Bill Ackman, right? And Bill Ackman came out and said, actually, it wasn't at my house, and it wasn't some kind of intervention. But there is more weight to this whole Israel thing now, especially hearing it from Charlie's mouth. Credit to Candace where it's due. A lot of the things, though, that she says, I don't buy into at all. That's just my opinion. The point is, we want to get to the truth. So with that said, let's look at the actual text messages. So you see here that Charlie is venting to a friend, right? And Andrew Colvert is the one over at TPUSA, verified these are from Charlie. He's actually one of the ones that originally, sent them out amongst how many ever people, and they ended up getting in the hands of Candace Owens eventually. But regardless, he verified all of this. So when you see that Charlie is kind of venting about losing another Jewish donor because he wasn't going to cancel Tucker, and he was thinking about having Candace at this event in December. Now, the first thing I want to say is speaking to his moral character. One thing that I always thought Charlie did really well is put Christ first, then his family, then his country, then Israel and everything else. I don't know if there was, the order after that, but I certainly knew, and he let everybody know, the order of how things worked in his life, right? And so I never saw him as somebody that's going to put Israel over anybody else, anybody that's important to him. And so this is, I think, pretty interesting. And you don't have to agree with everything that Tucker Carlson says or Candace Owens, but if you are a friend, then you want friends to back you up, regardless if you guys have disagreements over certain things. So I thought that was very interesting. What's also interesting is that he said, they fit every single stereotype, and it's left him no choice but to leave the pro-Israel movement. That is significant. Now, the reason I say that is because he was one of the biggest supporters of Israel. My thinking before these texts were actually validated was, why would they have anything to do with his assassination? And I'm not saying that they did or they didn't, right? We're going to explore that here in a little bit. But, why would they do that for one of the biggest voices in America that actually supports them? Now, I also found this, and this is what, just maybe a week or so after October 7th, back in 2023. We all know what happened there, where Charlie Kirk said this.
Government has a mandate, I gotta be careful the way I say this, they're gonna try to ethnically cleanse Gaza. Yep. I mean, I don't use that term lightly.
You can see how hesitant he is in actually putting that out there. But even for years after that, right, he's been very steadfast and built TPUSA in his support of Israel. But Israel was never the first in that conversation, just like what we talked about a little while ago. So is this just him venting, or is this actually saying, hey, I'm walking away altogether? It's really hard to know that, right? We can't ask the man himself, unfortunately, but all we can gather is from his public sentiment, it was a much stronger pro-Israel, almost all the way up until his last days, essentially. But right before that, there was actually some dispute there, right, between him and a donor. That doesn't mean that necessarily the Israeli government, right, he had a problem with. But, saying that you're going to, leave the pro-Israel side in the heat of the moment when, TPUSA and a lot of conservative movements and Democrats, everybody in politics, essentially, depends on donations. I think I'd probably be pretty upset about that too. And if you have ever said anything that you didn't really mean in the heat of the moment, we've all done that. Now, again, that's a pretty strong statement, but it definitely doesn't match his public sentiment towards Israel. So the most important question now, do we actually have a patsy, and is there an Israel motive? Well, we have to look at this logically speaking. And I'm not somebody that's just going to feed conspiracies, because that's not what I do. I want to look at the facts as we know them. But something very important to remember, and Andrew actually touched on this, I've talked about this, and so have other people, right? You have a case right now against this guy. The family deserves justice. They are going to seek the death penalty, right? They're not going to give you every single bit of information and potentially blow the case that they have. They're just not going to do it. No matter how many people that would satisfy, no matter how many questions that would answer, and yes, it would be nice to have some of this information, now they're building a case. Remember, when they released the video of him jumping off the roof, that was the day of the assassination, right? They released the picture. That was the day of. Think about all of the false and misleading things that we've seen up to this point. From AI photos of the shooter saying that he doesn't match, and and there's been FBI fumbles too, right? Oh, we caught the suspect and then we didn't catch him. Okay, so they're not perfect in this either. They've kind of led to some of this as well, right? So there's been some fumbles here and there. The unfortunate thing right now is that we don't know everything. Nobody does, right? This will come out in trial. Just as far as speculation, right now, my biggest thing and my question is, what would Israel's motive be? Before, I was saying, I don't know that there is much of one, because you have like the biggest supporter of Israel. What would taking him out do to favor Israel in any kind of way? If Charlie was serious about walking away and completely leaving the pro-Israel side, that would astonish me, right? People don't typically, walk away from their convictions, their beliefs that quickly. Now, it's true, he was asking questions. And this is what bothers me so much about this Israel thing, is because if you ask questions about them, somehow you're an anti-Semite. But if you go along with everything they say, which just seems ridiculous, right? You don't go along with everything your own mom says. Why would you go along with what is a foreign government? Why would you go along with every single thing they say? A lot of this is misconstrued from what people believe in the Bible, what they think the Bible is talking about when it comes to Israel, and what I believe the truth is. That's a topic for a whole nother day. But I think that's where a lot of it stems from. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't support them, but that doesn't mean that you can't ask that government questions, right? Our own government made it to which you should ask questions. You should question them. And they provided all these checks and balances essentially to keep their own selves in check, because we know that when men get power, they will absolutely abuse that power. And so not every government is innocent, right? You should be able to ask questions. Somehow that's become inflated with anti-Semitism. Very odd. So it's either full support and believe everything they say, or you're supporting Hamas in some way. I don't know. It's weird. Logically, it doesn't make sense to me. But I still would question the time frame, right? Was he saying these kinds of things before this, right? Because to pull off something like this with dozens of people involved to make this thing happen, if Israel was behind it, would take months, right? Within 48 hours, I don't see you pulling that story together. You know, it would take a lot of people, a lot of resources, and a lot of time to be able to pull that off. And right now, the best evidence that we have is that Tyler Robinson is the one that pulled the trigger. And what I don't want people to kind of forget as we close here is that you should be asking questions, and that's fine because we want the truth. But if the truth is that a left-wing ideology radicalized this dude so quickly, we should not forget that, because that's the true force in this entire thing that's getting lost a little bit. And so as the Democrats kind of fade into obscurity, right? Oh, they're pulling the narrative from us to Israel. You don't want that to get lost, because it is a dangerous ideology. But look, like I've said this entire time, I said it with Trump last year, I'll say it this time, said it with JFK, say it with 9/11, say it with a lot of this stuff. We've been lied to so many times that you can't expect people to trust anything you say now at this point. And so I think anybody that thinks you should trust the government 100% of the time, or even most of the time, seems a little bit silly considering how many times we've actually been lied to. And keeping an open mind, I think, is the most important thing here, man. But I tell you, it really shows more about Charlie's character and how he would not be pushed around, and he would not abandon his friends even if he didn't agree with them on everything. I think that actually says a whole lot more in these text messages than proving some kind of Israel plot to take him out. But again, keeping an open mind on all of these things is very important. There's more here than meets the eye. And so to admit that I was wrong, I don't think anybody really likes it, but there's definitely more here. Does it mean it's motive that Israel's the one that took him out? I don't believe that, not at this point. But again, we'll keep up with this, and I'll give you all the facts as I see them as this thing continues to unwind. There you go. There's my opinion. I'd love to hear yours. Let me know what you think down below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.